So just what are the most important sewing tools that a beginner needs? I've narrowed it down to 7, and I'm going to show you coming up. Hey, Shawnelle here, bringing you weekly videos to help you get better and better with your fashion sewing and be more creative too. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss out on a new video. So I've been teaching sewing for about 11 years now, a little over. I opened my sewing school in North Carolina in 2010. I had moved here from Los Angeles, where I do costume design and going back and forth and working in the movies and coming back and teaching, and really found it enjoyable and love to teach the beginners. I've got a lot of beginners, and about a quarter of them go on to becoming intermediate sewers, and I always put my beginners right into intermediate. It should be confident beginners, but as long as they know the basics, and I try to teach the basics really well, try to get it all in there. So if they're listening, they're learning. But along the way, I have seen what tools really help my students, and also what tools we really use. The most efficient ones. I have a sewing trays on my big drafting tables that we work off of, and this is all the essential tools that we use, and that's how we keep our organization system. We just put them all in at the end of the class, and then they're just a really easy way to keep them organized. I actually have a whole sewing class on that called Pro Tips, and it's on my Teachable sewing class. It's a free class. I go over 5 pro tips, and I'll leave a link below so that you can check that out. And if you have any questions on tools, leave a question in the comments below and I will try to answer them. And also, if you have any tools that you love, or if you remember it as a beginner that really helped you, I'd love to hear that also. But I broke these. I was trying to just do 5 essential tools, but I really came up with I needed 7. So I'm going to go over them and why they're essential to a beginner a little bit. So number 1, we use the measurement gauge a lot. Couple dollars, get it at Joann's. I always call it a hem gauge because I always, in my sewing, I always just used it for hems because I don't need to mark a seam anymore once you learn a couple other tools to use, and I can eyeball what 5/8 looks like nobody's business. Anyway, but how you use these is it's all in this little tab. So let's say you had to hem something 2 inches, you'd put it on the bottom of the tube, and then you would measure it from the raw edge. So you put it right there, and then you make a mark, and then there's your 2. So it's either a pressing mark, a fold over mark, then sometimes the seam allowances, we put it on 5/8 right here, and then we mark seam allowances, all that. So just 6-inch ruler, easy to handle and use, and real efficient. This is a newer hem gauge or measurement gauge that came out, and in my school it broke kind of fast because it's just a little plastic thing. This slips a little bit, but this part right here doesn't snap anymore. I loved it when I got it. I thought, oh, that's so cool, because I like the wider base, because what you do is you draw on a mark, and you use your chalks to make your mark on it, and this one's just a little one. So I thought I was going to try and switch these all to my sewing tools in the school, but not if they break that fast. I can't do that. So, but I have a. If you're using it, it probably won't. You know, you're in control of it. But my little students play with these tabs. As soon as I give it to them in their hands, they go like this. I go, stop, because then actually I just threw one away. I was looking for them, and it just slips. It doesn't even stay put. So if you just don't play with it, leave it there, you'll be good. So that's probably what happened to this one. Anyway. So measurement gauge. Then another real important are quilting pins. My tape measure just fell off. I like these long sturdier pins. They're sharp. Also freshen them up if you're sewing a lot. I throw these away. Usually I start a new pack every summer. Depends on how busy the school is. Sometimes I'll do it every 6 months, but these dull out too, and sometimes you even take them out of the box and they've got a little blunt edge and they'll ruin your fabric. So, but I like they're easier to handle. I like the longer ones, and I like the pin magnets, the magnet ones, because way more efficient. Tomatoes, not so much. These one in, one out. Those little tomatoes that you do that. Then we need good shears. Oh, like that. These are actually new shears I just bought. They're Gingers. These were a little pricey. They were about 70 bucks, but well worth it. This is a shear I've had since I opened the school. I got these just before I moved to North Carolina, and I love them. They're nice and loose. They cut really well. Never had them sharpened, but then I went and upgraded and got these, but they're tighter. They're a little harder to use. I'm trying to get used to them, but I don't let my students use these because they're sharp, and sometimes you drop a shear on the floor and you don't want it to hit your foot, like I did with mine. That was a knife when I was cooking, but I'm a little afraid of shears and sharp things now. But for a really good quality shear, these are a Singer brand, and I love these. They're comfortable. They cut really well. They're not too expensive. I think they're about $17. And then these are Gingers. I've had these since I opened the school. A friend of mine gave them to me, and they look like a little cheap pair of shears, but sharp. And I've never had them sharpened, any of these. These are actually just about a year old, and so far they're good, and I really like them. The Fiskars are pretty good too, but I had a student the other day bring in a pair of shears, and they look like they're paper shears. So some of those sewing kits that you get, they'll put a pair of scissors in there, and they don't really cut through fabric really well. So you want some good sharp ones, and it's also the way they're beveled in here that you got to think. Fabric shears go through fabric, not paper. So you don't want it gnawing your fabric. You want it to just go right through and not have any little hiccups in it. And that's usually when people borrow your shears and they go cut wires. That happened to me once. It was very upsetting. And then I was like cutting, and I was cutting chiffons all the time, and then I shouldn't have let them borrow it. But it's my fault. Anyway. So then we have cutting boards. Now, some people like to use the rotary shears, or the rotary cutters. They're not shears. Those are great, whatever you get used to, but I don't like the plastic mat, because and also, I don't know, I'm just better at shears, but it's whatever you get used to. I think the rotaries might be a little harder if you're doing shapes. It depends. This is a cutting board right here. The cardboard ones. Actually, this is the one Hancock Fabrics used to sell. They've gone out of business. It's black and white. I just really like it. Not too many lines on it. I mean, there's a lot of 1-inch marks on it, but these other lines, real simple. And I love their numbering system. We just had the inches, and the Dritz one is blue and white, and it has centimeters on it. And we don't use centimeters in America. And then a lot of red lines on it, the bias lines, which I guess are good sometimes, but lines I don't really need, like the curves and stuff. I'm looking at one right now. It's on my table, and I got a bunch of stuff all over it, so I can't pick it up. But anyway, but what is so great about these is you can actually anchor your fabric into the cardboard, and it's a great way to line up your fabrics to get them cut straight and everything. I'm going to be doing a video on that also, about cutting layouts and how to properly lay out your fabric. Then you put your patterns down, all that. So that's an art too. There's a lot to learn in sewing, little increments. So I guess that's with anything. What are you going to do? But I really like the cutting boards. They're in 1-inch squares. Your measurements are right at your fingertips, so we can look at this and go, oh, this piece of fabric is 3 inches wide, 1, 2, 3, right there. So you don't even have to get out a ruler a lot of times. And then the yardage is up here, like I need 1 1/4 yards. Measure it out right on the thing. These cutting boards are also about 2 yards long, and just really help you be efficient. Everything's right at your fingertips. Just don't keep it cluttered. Put all your tools in a tray and keep all your stuff off of it so that you can work. Okay, cutting board. Now we have quality thread. Really important. Teaching sewing, I've had a lot of thread issues with my students. I had one lady came to me and said, my sewing machine just like all of a sudden just doesn't work and all that stuff. So we'll bring it in, let me look at it. And I'm not a technician on sewing machine, but she first comes in and I could instantly tell it was a heavy duty thread. And I keep my bad threads in this little bag, so when I'm teaching I pull them out and show my students. So the heavy duty thread is pretty thick. It says heavy duty or top stitching. You can see the difference right here. We got just a nice all-purpose thread and a heavy duty thread. You need a special needle for it. You got to change your tension for different fabrics, and also if you're using outdoor fabrics, or like it's thick upholstery fabric, yeah, but it's like if you're making like a stiffer fabric, you just still don't need heavy duty thread. This thread here, this is Gutermann, my second favorite thread. I have a favorite that I can't find anymore in the local stores, but this is Gutermann, and it's called a long fibered polyester, so it has a smoothness to it. And you got to think the thread is smooth. It's going to be running through your machines and through the needle, so you want a long fibered smooth thread. My favorite thread is this one, and I've always used it, never can pronounce it. I think it's Swedish, Maliniki or something like that. And it's really nice and smooth. You can really tell a difference. Smooth thread. This is a dual duty one. These ones are a little rougher. They feel a little thicker, but that's what I would get if I couldn't find the other ones. Then there's also, I've had a lot of students buy, if I look through my little stash here, I've had one student here bought this embroidery thread. This was hers. She brought it. This was way back in probably 2011. This was my first year in there. Embroidery thread, they're real pretty. So if you look in the fabric stores and you see the thread, the embroidery ones are up on top, the real pretty glittery ones. Then you got your all-purpose threads, and then on the bottom you got your top stitching and your heavy duty. So it's the middle versions you want. Up here, a lot of people gravitate towards shiny, and they buy them. And these, she was sewing these. I remember she's trying to sew pockets on something, just real simple, decent sewing machine, everything, but it kept breaking in there, and they just don't like they're meant for embroidery machines, I guess. So I don't have an embroidery machine, and although I've seen them, they're really cool. So, but and I want one. I just saw the one with the 10 spools. Oh my God, so crazy. But so that also the polyester threads are great. There are a lot of cotton threads out there. I know quilters use cotton threads, but this was a cotton thread. I had a student using these way back in my early days, 2010 and 11, and the thread kept breaking, and I was like, she's threading it right, and I'm like, okay, let me thread it. So I thread it and I run it, and it just kept breaking like this. It was like bang. But the spool, I must have had this 20, 30 years, I guess, and it looks shiny and new. It's the color of the thread, but it's old thread, and cotton disintegrates after a while. It's a natural fiber, and it gets weaker, and that's just what happened to this. I also had a lady bring me spools in North Carolina. It used to be can't believe it, but it used to be like, I don't know, mills of, stuff being made here. Now there's like nothing, but as far as sewing goes. She brought me these big spools, and they looked like they were in an old box, and they were covered pretty well, but I just pulled them, and they were like big rolls and stuff, and I was like, oh, these are toast. They broke. So who knew? Anyway, actually I didn't know that about threads until I started teaching. There's also there's all different kinds of threads, but just get the all-purpose one. Also bobbins. I bought so you've seen those kits with all the pretty threads in there, and they look like they might have like these kind of spools. These are, again, if you look at them, they're a little rougher, still pretty sturdy, but they're okay in a pinch. I wouldn't sew a garment with it all the way, unless I had to. So it was a copolit. What's that word? Apocalypse. I had to sew something, I would. But also, I got these this little sewing kit I got because it was cute. good bobbins, actually. They're all like, there's about 20 of these bobbins all pre-done, and the thread is so thick on there. So these are actually one of my threads that we've done and just wound ourselves, and they're thinner. But these, I always notice my students, they're using these bobbins, and my beginners, and I go, oh, she's got one of those, because I just put them in my little bobbin case, and she's got one of those thick ones, and they always kind of give a little problem. I don't know. There's always, I'm always called to that sewing station like, help. And but just all-purpose thread is gonna help you out. Okay, that's enough about thread. Now we have seam ripper. So I was just gonna stop with that, but there's two more that are really important. Seam rippers. I also have a video that I'll leave up in the link up here on how to use a seam ripper, because I've had a lot of my students go, how do I use one of these? And I'm like, I don't know. Basically, you just pop out the thread with them, and there's the blade in here that actually dulls out pretty fast. I buy new ones all the time, and that's why this tape is here. I will put a tape on the old ones, and then put the new ones in the tray, because sometimes you don't want them to fly through a garment. You want to actually be very careful with something, so you want to kind of pull the thread, and sometimes you really, if you're working on denim or something like that, you want it to go through. So it's good to know the newer ones. I mean, if you have to have, actually in your own sewing kit, I'd have like a new one and an old one, and then when you put in a new one, you put tape on it and you throw the old one out and just keep two around. There are many different kinds of seam rippers around. I still just go for the old school. This was still an old school, but it has a nice gripper on it, so this is a good one. But then again, this one's an older one, and I really got to replace these. And if I remember, I had my dad's old sewing kit, and man, my dad had a sewing kit. I just thought of that. I don't think he could sew. Oh, he probably did. He was in the military. He probably could sew. But that middle part right there, just even with age, I think just dulls out, because what do you do? The little red ball is just simply so that this isn't sharp also and go through the garment. So good seam rippers are important. Learning how to use them are important. You don't want to go ruining your garments with trying to pull stuff through. So practice it like that. Last one is markers, and I'm going to do a whole video just on markers, but there's 3 we use here, and there's a lot of, in the Joann's store has pretty much everything you're always going to need. There's chalks, which we don't use here. We use the wax chalks. They're called chalks, but they're actually crayons, wax crayons. It's just made out of wax. They iron off, and we get them online because they don't sell these in the fabric stores. They sell them like at Mood and a couple like stores in LA or New York. The little mom and pop shops will sell these. Tailors use these. These are the ones you see them in the movies marking on your garments, and then I'm like, why are they doing that? Because they iron off. They just steam right off. And then friction pens are not sold in the fabric stores either. They're sold at Staples though, and they're the Pilot by Friction. And if you ever watch Project Runway, they have their sponsor them. So they come in all different colors, and they erase off of paper and they iron off of fabric. So, but they will cause, on some colors, they will cause a little bleach mark. So test it first, as with anything you do. And one of my favorite ones is the Air Erasables, the invisible ink one. I've been using these by 35 years. And I used to make a lot of wedding gowns, so I would actually draw on the bride, right on the dress. I'm going to put some lace right here, and I wouldn't tell her what it was, and I always like to freak her out. So she'd be like, ah, like that. Like, I know what I'm doing, I think. No, anyway. But these, depending on the fiber content, will disappear. I've had one little incident with these, but in 35 years, have never had any problems with it, except the one, and I'll tell you. I would draw on wedding gowns, and obviously it has to be on a lighter color, and they're so helpful, and they disappear like in a day, and they're air erasable. So if you actually trapped it in a plastic baggie, it would stay, because it just needs the air. So you also want to keep those capped so that the air doesn't go out. But one time I was working on a fabric, 4-ply silk. It runs about $60 a yard, and I was marking the zipper where I was going to do it. And I usually just do little dots, and it was on a, I think because it still showed up like, it was like on a purple fabric, because purple is a very uneven dye, and it always has problems, by the way. So like sun will bleach it out, markers will bleach it out, anything. But I was put little dots to show where I was going to put the zipper, and I got little tiny bleach marks. It was easy to fix. I actually just tucked it in a little bit more under there instead of replacing the whole panel, which would have been another yard and a half for me to fix that problem. At $60 a yard, that would have added up a lot. So I remember what client it was for. So I remember like going, ooh. It was like, but I learned when you make a mistake on that stuff like that, or something happens, you learn from it and you don't do it again. So, but always test your tools right there. So that is the 7 essential tools for a beginner. And I will leave. I also have a link at the end for a video I did on organization. Did 5 tips for organizing your sewing room that will really help efficiency. And I also have a beginner checklist that I will leave in the links below, and a tool sheet right here with all the tools that we use. These are what I teach in my school, and I'll leave that down below too, and you can get your own tool sheet here so that you make sure you get all of them. There's a couple other ones in there that I don't have time to cover, but those are the 7 essential ones. All right, I'll see you in the next sew bit.